A like fate awaited our admiration for such saints as knew how to order their worldly affairs with conspicuous success and prudence. True spirituality was indifferent to, nay, contemptuous and intolerant of, the things of this world. This message the Swami never mitigated. In giving it, he never faltered. The highest spirituality cannot tolerate the world. We understood clearly enough that these were the ideals of sainthood only. We were learning chapter after chapter of a great language which was to make it easy for us to hold communion with the ends of the earth. We gathered no confusion as to those questions which concern the life of citizenship and domestic virtue and form what may be regarded as the kindergarten of the soul. The idea that one country might best advance itself by learning to appreciate those ideals of order and responsibility which formed the glory of another was in no wise discredited. At the same time, we were given, as the eternal watchword of the Indian ideals, spirituality cannot tolerate the world. Did we, in contradiction, point to monastic orders, well-governed, highly organized, devoted to the public good, and contrast our long roll of abbots, bishops, and saintly lady abbesses with a few ragged and God-intoxicated beggars of the East? Yet we had to admit that even in the West, when the flame of spirituality had blazed suddenly to its brightest, it had taken their form. For those who know the land of Mirabai and Chaitanya, of Tukaram and Ramanuja, can hardly resist the impulse to clothe with the yellow garb the memory of St. Francis of Assisi also. In one of the volumes of the English translation of the Jakarta Birth Tales, there occur over and over again the words, "When a man has come to that place where he dreads heaven as much as hell." And I do not know how the realization of the Swami's presence brought could better be described. And I do not know how the realization of the Swami's presence brought could be better described. Most of those who listened to him in London in the year 1896 caught some glimpse by which they were led to understand a little of the meaning of the Eastern longing to escape from incarnation. But master of all these moods and dominating them was one that had barely been hinted at. In the words, "If this is true, what other thing could matter? If it is not true, what do our lives matter?" For there was a power in this teacher to sum up all the truths he himself had For there was a power in this teacher to sum up all the truths he himself had come to reach. For there was a power in this teacher to sum up all the truths he himself had come to teach, together with his own highest hope, and to treat the whole as a mean bribe, to be flung away fearlessly, if need were, for the good of others. Years after, this spoke more clearly in the indignant reply with which he turned on some remark of my own. Of course, I could commit a crime. Of course, I would commit a crime and go to hell forever, if by that I could really help a human being. It was the same impulse that spoke also in his constant repetition to some few of us, as if it had a special bearing on the present age, of the tale of that bodhisattva who had held himself back from nirvana till the last grain of dust in the universe should have gone in before him to salvation. Does it mean that the final mark of freedom lies in ceasing for the quest of freedom? I have found the same thing since, in many of the Indian stories, in Ramanuja, for instance, breaking his vow and proclaiming the sacred mantram to all the pariahs. In Buddha, keeping no secret but spending his whole life in work. In Shishupala, choosing to be the enemy of God, that he might the sooner return to him, and in innumerable legends of the saints fighting against the deities. But the Swami was not always entirely impersonal. Once, after a lecture, he came up to a small group of us and said, apropos of some subject that had been opened up, I have a superstition. It is nothing, but a personal superstition, that the same soul who came once as Buddha came afterwards as Christ. And then, lingering on the point of departure, he drifted into talk of his old master, of whom we then heard for the first time, and of the girl who, wedded and forgotten, gave her husband in his freedom with tears. His voice had sunk lower, and he talked till the tones had become dreamlike. But finally, almost in soliloquy, he shook off the mood that had stolen upon him, saying with a long breath, Yes, yes, these things have been, and they will again be. Go in peace, my daughter. Thy faith hath made thee whole. It was, in the course of a conversation much more casual than this, that he turned to me and said, I have plans for the women of my country in which you, I think, could be of great help to me. And I knew that I had heard a call which would change my life. What these plans were, I did not know, and the effort of abandoning the accustomed perspective was for the moment so great that I did not care to ask, but I had already gathered that there was much to learn. If one's conception of the world were to be made inclusive of the viewpoint of foreign peoples. And you have blasted other cities, had once been the startling reply when I had spoken of the necessity of making London fair. For to me the mystery and tragedy of London had long been the microcosm of the human problem, standing as the symbol of the whole world's call. And you have blasted other cities to make this city of yours beautiful. I could elicit no more, but the words echoed in my ears for many days. In my eyes, our city was not beautiful. My question had been misunderstood. But through this misunderstanding, I had discovered that there was another point of view. The English are born on an island, and they are always trying to live on it, said the master once to me, and certainly the remark seems true of myself, as I look back on this period of my life and see how determinately insular even my ideals had hitherto been. I learned no more of the Indian point of view during my life in England. The friend who afterwards called me to her side in India chose a certain evening in London, when both the Swami and myself were her guests for an hour, to tell him of my willingness to help his work. He was evidently surprised, but said quietly, For my own part, I will be incarnated 200 times, if that is necessary to do this work amongst my people that I have undertaken. And the words stand in my own mind beside those which he afterwards wrote to me on the eve of my departure. I will stand by you unto death. Whether you work for India or not, whether you give up Vedanta or remain in it, the tusks of the elephant come out, but they never go back. Even so are the words of a man. But these references to the Swami's own people were merely personal, and as such were strictly subordinate. In his classes, in his teachings, his one longing seemed to be for the salvation of men from ignorance. Such love, such pity, those who heard him never saw elsewhere. To him, his disciples were his disciples. There was neither Indian nor European there, and yet he was profoundly conscious of the historic significance of his own preaching. On the occasion of his last appearance in London, at the Royal Society of Painters in Watercolors, on Sunday afternoon, December 15th, 1896, he pointed out the fact that history repeats itself, and that Christianity had been rendered possible only by the Roman peace, and it may well have been that the Buddha, like dignity, and the calm of bearing which so impressed us, were but the expression of his far outlook and serene conviction that there would yet be seen a great army of Indian preachers in the West, reaping the harvest that he had sown so well, and making ready in their turn new harvests for the more distant reaping of the future.